A very good evening to all our viewers in Guyana, the Caribbean, around the world, and of course here in New York as we bring you our Monday night program. I'm hosted, of course, by Mr. Nohar Singh from Globespan 24x7. We want to thank him for making this platform available. And of course, Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. We want to thank all our audience for tuning in today, being the first day of the new session in that Saturday night, Sunday morning here in the US. The clock went back 1 hour. So we are now 7 o'clock here in the US and you're 8 o'clock in Guyana. We also want to remind our viewers that tonight also is what is called a blood moon. There is a lunar eclipse tonight. I think if you don't see it tonight, and we'll see it here in the US and in Guyana, but the next one will be in 2025, I'm told. So the entire solar eclipse. So if you have some time tonight, come out, maybe like 3 o'clock, I believe, and you will see it, some part of the eclipse. This evening, we are very honored to have two outstanding Guyanese, great trade unionists in the politics of Guyana, in the union movement. Of course, Mr. Patrick Yarde, he has been the president of the Guyana Public Service Union for many years. Mr. Yarde, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Okay, and of course, we also have Ms. Gardner. She's the first vice president of the union. Ms. Gardner, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and of course, my co-host is Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Mr. Yarde, and welcome, Ms. Gardner. You're listening to the pulse of the people, Globespan Television. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Mr. Yarde, this year, the union celebrated 99 years of its existence, and a really remarkable feat on June 8, 1923, British Guyana Civil Service Association. Then it was after our republic in 1970, it became the Guyana Public Service Union. And in 1972, you also merged with the Medical Employee Union in 75. Can you give us a little recap on the history of the union and what are your plans for the centenary next year?
Well, the union was formed in 1923. The forefathers, and I have a great regard for them, considered it necessary to bring public servants, the local public servants, the Guyanese public servants together because they were at a great disadvantage. And if you look at their struggles, you see it moved from then when women did not have a career in the public service today, where they do have a career in the public service. They gain 5-day work week. You know, they had the public service or the civil service dens, housing scheme, Lamar Gardens, the credit union. It was considered necessary to develop a credit union, which unfortunately is out of the genuine public servants' hand today through a great irregularity. You know, and there are many achievements within the public service, moving from the colonial days where you had long vacation leave, now you have annual vacation leave, and you have 1 month tax-free. Sadly. So again, from the forefathers, to benefit from them, that you did not have to squeeze out of your monthly earnings. You had an extra month salary, tax-free, where you could afford a vacation. And there are many things that are in the pipeline. You having was unfortunate a greater struggle now to achieve things that are well deserving for public servants. And one of the major issues in this period is having a living wage. So it is so difficult to get respect for collective bargaining and to sit down in a very enlightened environment to discuss how you could achieve things collectively. Today, when you would have wanted, and that's one of my dreams, to have unity, racial unity, you have that as a challenge today in the public service. As a matter of fact, we had to amend our rules eventually in 1997 to address race relations. And it is unfortunate, in as much as we reached out to governments, they were not so welcoming in addressing that concern of race relations. We even put up a policy paper on having it introduced in the public service. And that paper is we see serious challenges in having that. And in fact, members approach me about they being told to get out the Black Man Union. You know, I found it so disgusting. But we have at the PSU head office a race-free environment, and I'm very encouraged how members of all races come together to assist in dealing with that challenge. And that challenge is there for us because some people see it as a political advantage. You know, so at this stage, I let Dawn contribute because she is the future. I'm hoping by next year she will be the first female elected as president of the Guyana Public Service.
That's a good recommendation from your boss there, Ms. Gardner. But before you come on, Ms. Gardner, Mr. Yarde, if you don't mind, please, when you say race relation, you want to be more explicit in terms of what the union is fighting for in that regard?
We can see obstacles to national development if we do not overcome the hurdle of racial harmony in Guyana. Okay, we can see obstacles of national development. And we have been going out there, we have expended millions of dollars to bring about that harmony that is so necessary nationally. If the energies that are used to keep people divided could be put to use in bringing about national unity, you'll be surprised to see how much more developed we could be as a country.
I agree with you. Ms. Gardner, your boss did a really good job there. In terms of the union philosophy or policy is really the struggle for better working condition, security of tenure, equality and fair wages, while providing high quality public service to our nation. So my question to you, Ms. Gardner, are we getting the high quality service from our public servants, in your view?
Yes, we are getting high quality public service from our view. It could be better. It's not the highest that we would want it to be, but there's so many reasons, so many obstacles that preventing those high quality or the quality that we expect to be. But as it is, we are receiving a large percentage of the quality that we are expecting.
Okay, and maybe Mr. Yarde, if you don't mind, or you, Ms. Gardner, as well, before Dr. Rose come on. There are, concerns about the public service in many quarters and Ms. Gardner said the quality is getting better. But would you support a public service exam for different categories, like we have here in the US? Would that be something that you would support? So when we get the real cream of the crop for professionals, we ensure that they get a salary that is commensurate with their qualification and professionalism.
If I go before Mr. Yarde,
Yeah.
if you look at the rate of the graduates from the University of Guyana, and you can recognize it's increasing. Public servants today are furthering their studies. Public servants recognize, and with the guidance of the union, public servants have recognized the importance of qualifying themselves. If we look at what is happening out there in the ministries, today we have public servants who are sitting there in junior positions and who are well qualified, who read for a master's degree, who read for a doctorate. As we talk, we have currently that we have even represented recently a young lady who just have a couple of years service in the public service, and today she's reading for a doctorate in public health. Right? We have a number of public servants who have read for a master. So today, public servants are qualifying themselves for the positions. But the issue is, one, they're not being paid for the qualifications. Two, they're not getting the scope to function. Three, they're not even getting the positions that they are applying for. You have a lot of persons in the public service, a lot of contract employees. And these contract employees have come in, joined the public service to supersede the traditional public servants who were there, persons who were there on the pensionable establishment. Right? So we have a challenge there. And so if we come to, if I should answer your question about the writing of the exam, we have to first understand or agreed on the process in moving forward in doing that, because we won't want to have persons on the traditional public service or in the pensionable establishment to write tests against those who are on contract. These positions are permanent pensionable established positions, and persons should be appointed through the Public Service Commission on the permanent pensionable establishment, and they should be the promotion or appointment should be based on merit.
I agree with Ms. Gardner. So you're not against the exam, but you got to work out the modus operandi for it to work.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Mr. Yarde, you want to mention anything before Dr. Rose comes on? After that?
I share Ms. Gardner's view. One must recognize that the public service is a multi-skilled organization. And therefore, when you're speaking about the entrance examination, it obviously cannot be one standard type of examination for everyone. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that they do not do in the public service, which was done previously, is there was this initial orientation when you join the public service, and there was lots of benefits from that. And you had people who come into the public service of varying skills would sit for a 2 or 3 weeks orientation acquaintance with the public service. And that is something that should be reintroduced within the public service. As Ms. Guyana already mentioned, there are so many persons in the public service with a variety of different skills in the public service. And there's so many frustration. Right now, again, there's an exodus from the public service. Ms. Guyana was sharing with me an experience she had where she called for a nurse who she spoke with a couple of weeks before. And she said, Ms. Guyana, I'm no longer in Guyana, I'm in England, And that was very shocking to me too, because I'm very acquainted with that person. As there's a scene, especially in the health sector, where there's this public health crisis, and you need every skill that you could have in the health sector in Guyana. It is bleeding. So there are lots of things that have got to be remedied before you attempt to introduce something that may not be relevant and necessary at this time.
And I want to assure both of you you're in good company. Dr. Rose is asking for around 50,000 minimum wage. I'm saying 200,000 should be our minimum wage, but that's a discussion for the union and the government to go on. Dr. Rose?
Good night, Ms. Gardner. Good night again, Mr. Yarde. Mr. Yarde,
Good night, Dr. Rose.
Your name has been around for the longest while in trade unionism. Briefly, give us a background of yourself. Very, very briefly.
Well, very briefly is that I did not plan to stay in the public service for the length of time that I've been there. And recognizing that there was, an exodus of public servants, there were not people who would stand up, for the rights of public servants. We've had the experience where presidents absconded from the leadership position. I recognized that I had to make that sacrifice. And I'm saying this very sincerely. Ms. Gardner, I'm convinced, is prepared to make that sacrifice. We've had struggles. I've had death threats. I've had to write presidents who people use their names, threatening my life, to ask them why these people feel they could go to that extent of using your name, But there's no fear where that is concerned. As a matter of fact, Dawn could say, I wanted to leave 2 terms before now. And they were pleased with me to remain in that position. The last election, I made it clear I'm not going out and campaign. Okay, if it is that people would like me to stay, well then let's see how effective they could be. Right? The women in the public service, I have contributed significantly. The first elected female vice president was under my presidency. The first appointed female general secretaries, the first 2, were under my presidency. I have got the union rules amended to have a youth committee, and we have been promoting youth development within the union. The problem with it, though, is that these people are not sticking around, not because of the union, but they find that it is, in this enlightened day and age, it takes too much for you to reason with people to give them opportunities within the public service. We have tried to get within the public service certain programs developed. As a matter of fact, the Guyana Public Service Union, having done a survey, and that's before I became president, recognized that there was need for institutional strengthening within the public service. And when the survey was done, there was a recognition that the union had to get involved because the Christian Labor College was not offering enough opportunities to the public servants. And the union set up a training program, and we took it to the equivalency board. At that time, Dr. Walcott was vice chancellor for the university. And it was recognized and accepted as an entrance qualification for persons to go to the University of Guyana. Because there were many people who had skills but not academic qualifications to be accepted. And that certificate was accepted as an entrance qualification for the University of Guyana. And many persons, you'll be shocked to know, the persons who got into the university because of the Public Service Union qualification.
Okay. Ms. Gardner, Mr. Yarde has clearly indicated that he might not be around after next year, or he will give it up next year. And you might be the new leader, first female president for the GPS, the Guyana Public Service Union. What message you have for the workers, and what would you do differently today to boost the union's ability to negotiate with the government?
Well, the is that I plead with workers to continue to be united, to continue to support your union. It's very important as workers, we are unionized. Where there's unity, there's strength. So we have without a trade union, we're in trouble as workers. Without workers being part of a trade union, their rights will be trampled upon. No hope, there is no security of tenure. And then compare what is happening with who are not union. We recognize this. So I will plead with the public servants to continue. So what I will negotiate with the government is not what Don Gardner will negotiate with the government. It's what the workers, the mandate the workers give to Don Gardner to negotiate with the government. I will continue to work with the workers to work towards the negotiate for them. As a matter of fact, just take note, Don Gardner is a public servant too.
Okay. Mr. Yarde, you have stated that the government has not met with the public service union since taking office 2+ years ago. What options you have?
I said they did not negotiate.
Right.
We've had meetings, but they were wastes of time.
Okay.
It was not due respect for the agreements that we have, legitimate agreements, which clearly outline time frames in which you do things. And this is not happening, you know, and it is most unfortunate. As a matter of fact, it is on record that we have had meetings where we say, listen, let us have non-crisis meetings. We would like to hear your problems, your experiences, and let us see how we could assist you too. And you're not getting that enlightened approach to deal with matters. As a matter of fact, the last time we have had such a meaningful meeting was with Dr. Jagan just before he died in 1997. And he set up a joint committee to look into the problems of the public service. I could have that report scanned and send it to you. The joint committee was Shigbash heading the government side, and I, at the time, was president of the CUC, heading the union side. And we unanimously made a recommendation to the government. It happened so when that report was completed and the recommendations were made, Dr. Jagan died. And that report was scrapped. You know, that was one of the most shocking things that, and that was in 1997. And that is what contributed to that 57-day strike in 1999. Because when we recognized that there was no way we could get things done in that enlightened form, we had to then take to the streets to get things done. And there was a promise made. As a matter of fact, the person who signed the agreement in 1999 was Roger Luncheon. And there was a promise made that this is the way we will go forward in the future. I'm shocked to recognize today now, when there is a trade union recognition bill that was put in place to legitimize the way we do things, people are saying that these collective agreements are not legally binding and they do not have an obligation to meet with us. It's shocking. But like I said, you know, and it may be deadly for quite a few people, but the coronavirus may have been a blessing in disguise for some people. That we are still trying to pursue an enlightened approach to dealing with matters. We are now going to court to get a certain recognition, and we hope on this occasion that the decisions of the courts would be respected. We have had to face the situation where the court at every level pronounced, for instance, like the reinstatement of Class 2, like the reinstatement of the marshals of the Supreme Court, and the government refused to respect those court orders.
Okay, before I go to Ms. Gardner, let me ask you this question. You have criticized President Ali's One Guyana initiative, saying that actually it's bogus, it doesn't represent anything. Why?
I've criticized it simply because our expectation, we have discussed it at the union level, and our expectations are not being realized. As a matter of fact, I said, listen, Don is the future. Let her write these letters. Okay, maybe people may have a hang up about me. And let her speak for herself. How many letters she's written? And where's the response? You know, we could share the correspondence with you that we've written. As a matter of fact, we wrote a correspondence pleading to address the health sector. It is bleeding. The people are leaving. The country needs these healthcare workers. And we'll share that with you too. And we haven't got a response to that letter up to now. You know, what we're having is impositions. What we're having is apparent handouts. And we will reject that type of treatment.
Okay. Ms. Gardner, Article 147 gives union the bargaining right to negotiate on behalf of their members. As is stated in the papers and in other media outlets time and time again, the government does not want to negotiate and is not prepared to negotiate with the union. I will ask you the same question I asked Mr. Yarde. What options do you have? Ms. Gardner, you there? Ms. Gardner, your mic is muted. Okay.
Yes, I'm here. No, it's not.
Yeah, we hear you. You heard my question? Ms. Gardner, you heard my question?
Yes, I think I think I got your question. What Ms. Yarde said, one of the options we have is that we have taken the matter to the courts. So we can have some legal guidance as it relates to moving forward on collective bargaining. Because yes, Guyana has laws. We have Guyana also has ratified conventions. We also have agreements that the Guyana Public Service Union and the government of Guyana have signed, which state that we must negotiate in good faith. And for some reason or the other, there is a reluctance in negotiating. So let's give it a try, give the court a try and see and seek some guidance from the court. That's one of the options. I will wait that option.
Was the same reluctance evident in the last administration to negotiate with the union?
Well, yes, the last administration, there was some reluctance too. There were some reluctance, and even though we have met at a few meetings, yeah, even though we have just give me, Missy, can you take it from me? Let me.
Yes. Yeah, we're having a breakdown in your. Go ahead, Mr. Yarde.
Yes. And let me add to what Don stated just now. Apart from going to the courts, we are going to approach the ILO once more. As a matter of fact, Don and I met with an ILO specialist in Trinidad a few weeks ago. We are also putting our case to the ILO. You know, at every level that we have stated our position, we were not criticized. As a matter of fact, we were praised for the efforts that we are making. Now, you say Article 147 gives you that right. And that was one of the things that is the article we looked at when we decided to go to the courts. But if you look at Article 147(3), you will see at the end their collective arguments. Well, I'm very sensitive to anything that passed in Parliament about trade unionism rights. And I say I can't recall this ever happening, that they amended collective agreements to collective arguments in the Constitution. And we wrote the clerk of the National Assembly about this, you know, and we're waiting a response. How collective agreements change to collective arguments. We want to know if it's a genuine error or if people are going to such an extreme to tamper with trade union rights.
Okay. You have stated that this government is pauperizing public servants. Explain to your listeners what you mean.
Well, public servants struggled. As a matter of fact, in 1999, one of the things that caused the strike was we put up a proposal, a multi-year proposal for 3 years with percentages 30, 40, 50. And we learned that the government entered into an agreement with the IMF for 3%, not more than 3%, for a 10-year period. Okay, well, that was ridiculous to us because we consulted extensively with the proposal that we put up. It went to arbitration. Okay, and the arbitrators, there was a split decision with the panel. There was Dr. Aubrey Armstrong and Dr. Clive Thomas, who ruled that the government could afford to pay 31.1% in the first year and 26.66% in the second year. You would recognize that that means that they would be giving in 2 years what the government said we couldn't get in 10 years. They were given individually in 2 years what the government said we couldn't get over a 10-year period. In essence, what they were given in 2 years was 20 times what the government wanted to give for the 2 years. Okay? And if you look at the inflation rate, because the arguments they were making is that the country would collapse economically. And if you look at the inflation rate for 2001, because those awards were for 1999 and 2000, if you look at the inflation rate for 2001, you'll see it was 1.6%. Okay? Is it that the government was being misled? Is it that there was someone so naive that was making that recommendation that the country was collapsed? And you speak to the businessmen. 2001 was the best year for business. The inflation rate was never so low again in Guyana. And we do question the Stats Bureau inflation rates. Okay, so that is what I could say to you as evidence. Now with oil revenue, and the government is like Father Christmas around the place, giving out money to people who they expect to produce. And the public servants who collect the revenue, the public servants who look after healthcare, the public servants who are dealing with all the projects in Guyana, the public servants who are relied upon to make the government's program a success. In the pandemic year of 2020, not 1 cent was given, and this economy skyrocketed. And then in 2021, a measly 7% handout was given to public servants. And it appears as though they are waiting until Christmas again to give another handout. But I'll say this, you know, I hope that mistake is not made. I thought this government would have learned, like the last government did too, people resentment from the way they're being treated. Okay, they could afford to pay much more. Look at the handouts that they're going around the place giving. And the public servant is being kept suppressed, you know? And there is a reaction, which is unfortunate, but I don't blame them. There's a reaction. People are just quitting and leaving. Like I said, in the health sector, I believe over 1,000 nurses might have left Guyana by now. And that is an area that you need to reinforce. Healthcare is absolutely necessary right now.
Okay, Charles, over to you.
Mr. Yarde, and I see Ms. Gardner is back. Ms. Gardner, you're muted. But Mr. Yarde, I've seen in 2017, you made a statement saying that was with the coalition in office. You said the union has now feel betrayed. What do you mean by that?
Well, let me say this. Our conclusion before the elections in 2015 was there was an absence of good governance in Guyana. And we met with persons in the coalition. And we were given quite a bit of assurances, respect for collective bargaining, respect for trade union rights, good governance, and a variety of factors. And then when they came into office, and we started to discuss now improvements in conditions of service for public servants, we were told, well, look, we're setting up a commission headed by Dr. Hal Lachman to look into the public service and make recommendations. Well, up to now, we haven't discussed that report, and they're out of office.
Because you mentioned, that the union has placed the government on notice that it will unfold strategies to address the situation unless its posture changes with alacrity. It didn't happen, but what did the union did?
The union issued 2 ultimatums. 2 ultimatums. And I was out of the country, and the government met with the officers in charge, and they gave a commitment that they will address the issues. Okay? And that did not happen.
It didn't happen. Because, Mr. Yarde, what I'm seeing, and if you don't mind, in 1993, there was a 20% tax-free increase to public servants. In 1998, you had a 30% at the bottom and 13.5 at the top. And as you mentioned on the Armstrong Commission, the tribunal in 1999, 31%, and then in 2000, 26.66%. All these increases happened under the PPP government. Has there been...
They did, but they were not generous in giving it. There was a struggle to, right? Don't ignore that.
No, but I know, I understand what you're saying, but the fact is, under the PPP, the public servants in salary increase went up, much more than even the last 5 years of the coalition, when you thought that there was a friend in government and it never happened.
Yes, that is accurate. But it could have gone up much more under the PPP. And definitely, if the last government was prudent, they would have done much more. The money that they left, the PPP is showing what is in the coffers and what they will do for it in their constituents. That's what's happening.
And I know this is, when your statement at the beginning was very shocking, because generally, and this is not against you, but trade union leaders in Guyana, we have seen in GAU, for instance, in other trade union, that the president stays there basically for life. So you are now giving notice that you're going to step down soon, and Ms. Gardner will take over. Ms. Gardner, if the government is not
Please let me make this comment before we
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
because it baffles me a lot. Kamal Shan was older than I am. Carmel Duncan is older than I am by years. And I never, ever listened to those type of criticisms, you know.
No,
I
no,
got
it's not a criticism, Mr. Yard. It's only a comment that's saying that what we have seen in Gao, for instance, that the president.
whatever way you want to put it. And I'm making a point. I always listen to these comments being made towards me. And there are people who were older than me who died in the job, people who were still in the job that are older than me. And those comments are not being made.
Please don't say it that way. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it to direct to you. But I'm saying what we have seen in Guyana is that the president of unions, they stay on until they die, and then they never change. But when you made a statement that you're leaving, that was kind of a news. Anyway, Miss Gardner, when
I'm
you
here.
will become the next president of the union, and as we have seen in the coalition, now we're seeing in the current government, that there seems to be the government decide what the increase will be, and the union really have no say. Why should the union continue to accept that all the time?
Well, the first thing as trade unionists, as a young trade unionist too, is that we have to develop a thinking that we cannot trust the politicians, or we should not trust the politicians. One of the things that we have recognized is that neither of the government, they have not recognized the importance of public servants. Public servants are the ones who execute the policies of the government. Public servants are the ones who make the government look good at the end of the day. Because the government would normally go out there and say, I've achieved this, or we have achieved this, or my government has achieved this. But if little that you know, the government cannot achieve it on its own. It is the public servants who cause the government to achieve it. As public servants, we have to bring some form of pressure on the government, whichever government, to let them understand that they have to respect us as public servants. And if I should, and this bring me to the point where your comment, question, or whatever it was, Justin, that you talked to Mr. Yarde about. Now, I remember maybe about 2 elections ago, I was nominated to be the president for GPSU. And I said to my colleagues, including Mr. Yarde, now listen, Don Gardner is not prepared at this moment to be the president. If Don Gardner fails, his entire public service fails. So I need the support now. I need the support, one, for you to allow me to further my studies. I need the support for me to understudy Mr. Yarde, for me to get more experience about trade unionism, about negotiations, because there's no better person for you to get those experience from, or those guidance from, than Mr. Yarde, who is one of the persons there in the trade union movement, who is recognized not only locally, but internationally for his skills and his dedication towards the trade unionism. So it's no better person for me to get those guidance from. And today I want, as we on this, I want to take that opportunity also to express my appreciation to my colleagues for giving me that support. So now that I'm in a better position, I am now prepared to pick up from where Mr. Yarde as the president would leave us and move forward with the support of my other colleagues. So I will encourage them that we as public servants, we have to bring some amount of pressure. Whatever
And
pressure
right,
it is, but we have to sit and discuss that so that we can allow the government, whoever government, whichever government, to have that respect for the public service.
Ms.
I got
Garner, yes, sorry, yes, go on, Mr. Yarde.
a comment too, which I think is most unfair. The Guyana Public Service Union stood up to governments. The second longest nurses strike in the world was against Desmond Hoyt. The Guyana Public Service Union stood up there to Hoyt. And under the PPP, there were 2 noticeable strikes, right? And there was one in 1994. And then there was the 1999 strike. However, it is a concern, and I'm very proud of the members whenever we are going to go on strike. We recognize the problems that the citizens of Guyana would face, especially in the health sector, where there was such a large percentage of healthcare being a government responsibility. We had to sit to discuss to have emergency crews at hospitals to deal with emergencies that would come in. It is not something that we are very happy to do. When we are going to take industrial action, we take into consideration the consequences for the population when we take industrial action, and but we're being pushed to it. And there sometimes when we have serious clashes within the ranks of our members, why is it you reluctant to strike against the government? No, we tell them, listen, we got to be careful. We're public servants, right? We must take pride in delivering quality public service. And we must also be able to convince the public whenever we take industrial action, we must get the public support. Okay. And we have been able to get that.
Mr. Yarde, there are reports here, as you know, here in the U.S., among the Guyanese of African descent who think that the government is practicing racial politics and a racist government. And there's also some report in Guyana saying that. What is the union view? Is the government practicing racial politics?
There's definitely evidence of racial politics, right? We're not going to point a finger in a particular direction at this moment, but from government functionaries, there's definitely evidence of it. Okay, and we have that information. We have it.
And what are some of the things that you can point out to us where the practice that is racial politics?
Well, removing people from positions, not employing certain people, and the way they deal with disciplinary matters, where they're protective of some people and where they're very, vicious with others. Okay, I'm saying to you, we feel it's a bit premature going out now with the evidence, but we have it. And I have stated that. And I dare anyone to challenge me on that. We have the information.
And Mr. Yarde, may I ask you directly, with you and your union, are you racist against the government?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Every time we had a conference under PPP or PNC, we invited the government functionaries to address that conference. We tell them, come and speak to your workers, right? You come and tell them what you're prepared to do for them. There was never a conference that we had that we did not have a government functionary. As a matter of fact, we normally would invite presidents, okay? A government functionary to address the conference. One PPP president refused an invitation from us, and that was by Yarde.
All the others came.
Jagan came, Mrs. Jagan came, Sam Hines came,
Well, why is it, Mr. Yarde, and maybe Ms. Gardener can tell us, why is it there's some feeling that the Public Service Union is more of a union against the PPP government? Is there any truth in that? What are your views? Because that's a real issue that people talk about.
Well, I don't know, but people, you may have heard it from some persons, but I don't mean as general as that. When Dr. Jagan died, we had a wake at the PSU headquarters for him, and we invited everyone to that occasion. We proudly did it. And I traveled up to the quarantine for his funeral. Okay? They kept back the body. I didn't have arrangements to overnight, and I returned to Georgetown. But we have photographs there about that. Okay? So whoever wants to say that, they have an agenda, they have a motive. But the PSU has always been professional in dealing with the government. And there's again the evidence.
Okay, I know, Ms. Gardener, we're coming to program time, but in terms of what's the future in terms of what you with Mr. Yarde? I guess when he steps down, he'll still be advising the public service because you need that skill set that he has, and you can't get rid of that knowledge that he has accumulated over the years. What direction will the union take to ensure that they can work closely in collaboration with the government to do exactly what the public service should do and what the government can do? As Mr. Yarde rightly said, it's the government employees, is the employees of the government. So how do you plan to work in that mix to ensure that both government and the union are happy and the workers at the end are the one that will benefit from that kind of discussion?
As I said before, is we have to work with the government. We have to try to convince the government the importance of the public sector workers, the importance of public servants of being respected. And as long as we get the government, whichever government, to understand that, we will have a positive relationship. But I think there is some kind of discomfort, I would want to believe, maybe among whoever the politicians, that they're not comfortable. You know, I don't know if they're fearful or what. I don't know. But they have to understand public sector workers are the ones who execute the policies of the government. And there should be no fear as it relates to public sector workers. Yes, you may be a new minister for a ministry. The public servants have more experience and knowledge of the ministry than you. But at the same time, you're the politician, we're the public servants. Allow us to guide you through. But the ministers, they're coming into power, they're coming into offices with the broad shoulders and a pip on the shoulder and a stomach in the ear. I'm the minister, and I'm not going to take advice or instructions from you. We're not giving instructions. We just want them to understand it's guidance. This is the ministry. This is how it should work. This is in keeping with the rules. This is in keeping with the policies. And this is how you should, we have to work. So the issue is that as long as they understand that, we will be able to move forward in a positive relationship.
Okay.
We have to get that.
Before Dr. Rose come on, Mr. Yarde, should our permanent secretaries be career public servants who rise to that position rather than government? And the coalition did the same thing. I guess the people did the same thing. They're bringing people from outside to be permanent secretaries. Should our permanent secretaries be career civil servants?
I believe that people within the public service should be given that opportunity to elevate to the position of permanent secretary. However, I would not close the door to persons who are qualified and suitable coming in if they could contribute to enhancing the public service.
Okay, Dr. Rose?
Yes, Mr. Yarde, you spoke earlier about the exodus, the people, qualified people leaving the country and leaving the public service. They're leaving the nursing profession, the teaching profession. In 2010, 15% of all UG graduates and specialists like nurses and so forth were leaving the country. In 2017, that number increased to 36%. And today, it is at 50%. If this brain drain continues, what do you think will happen to the public service to provide good service to the people?
It will definitely have an effect on the public service, but not only the public service, the entire country. And you must bear in mind that these persons who are leaving were being funded by public funds in the main, and therefore it was a poor investment. And therefore, what should be done is to have some form of exercise to determine what really is contributing to that exodus. As a matter of fact, we are now in a better position with the few years that we will be having the oil revenue coming in to invest in improving not only the conditions of service, but improving the economy of the country as a whole, so that not only would people stay, but you'll attract people back to the country. We have asked the governments to have those type of discussions, non-crisis discussions. Let us sit and discuss what needs to be done, and let us see how best we could contribute to these things happening. But you've been dealing with governments, and not only the PPP government, But governments who think they know everything, and they should do whatever they feel like doing. And that can't work in this modern and enlightened age. It wouldn't work.
Ms. Gardner, I'm calling every night, every Monday night, for a starting salary for public service at $150,000. My colleague Charles, he said that should increase to $200,000 a month. What do you think should be the starting salary of public servants? Given the cost of living and all other additional costs to the people.
Personally, I would go for a take home of nothing less than 150. Yes, given the cost of living. Because if you look at electricity, you have electricity bill from nothing less than $10,000. You have water. If you have a child going to school, now you have to ensure that that child um, meals is up to standard, even if it's one meal, one balanced meal per day. And you look at what is happening out there in the supermarket, it's not an easy road. The transportation to take that child to school, there's a cost attached to that. And I can go on and on. So I would not go nothing less than 150 as the take home for a public servant who is within the category of the minimum wage. The minimum wage should be nothing less than 150 per month.
The retirement age is at 55. You think that should be increased?
Yes,
So the
55 should be.
most of the country in Caribbean do have a retirement age 60 and 62 on those ages. What do you think should be the retirement age?
Over 2 decades ago, and it is still there to be negotiated, we asked for the retirement age to increase to 65 because people are living longer. Over 2 decades ago, we put that recommendation in. And I think Don is being a bit generous because several years ago, I said the minimum wage at the Army and Police Force should be $1,000
US. Yeah, that's true.
I said that at a conference that we had. Okay? And we, as I said to you, we also did not look at this thing without balance. We looked at it also from improving qualifications. Okay, we said there should be staff development policies, right? And a variety of aspects we looked at. And as I said earlier, we didn't only talk about it, we went and instituted a program to get members to go to the University of Guyana, right? I'd like to say this. As a matter of fact, let me say this, I was criticized when the coalition went in and they raised salaries by 50%. And I said it was not exorbitant. But I say it's not only they need an increase in salary, public servants need an increase much more than that. But people criticize me as if I was saying I supported that in isolation to the fact that I was not looking generally at everybody else. One of the things that are contributing to low salary in the public service is the government relationship with businessmen. Because we also supported the private sector salaries being increased. And look how long it took for them to get an increase in salary in the private sector. And that is one of the bugbears that is there.
Okay. A report recently came out, and the government is saying it's 2019, but the United Nations insists it's not 2019, it's today. The poverty rate in Guyana is at 50%. Also, 48% of kids are going to school without lunch. And a number of children, the parents can't afford to send them to school 5 days a week with transportation costs. They're cutting back by sending them to 3 days a week to school because of the cost of living. What impact do you think this will have on the country in general?
Before Mr. Yarde answer you, just only last week, one of our staff had to stop at the police stopped him on the road, and he came into office breathless, and he said, I stopped on the road, the police stopped me, In the middle of that, a young woman walked up to the police officer with a child, asking the police officer for $500 to buy a meal for her child to go to school. So that's to tell you how critical it is. Go ahead, Miss Yarde.
So I'm saying that it will have a very negative effect, and not it will have, it is having a very negative effect on the country. And I want to believe that the rates are much higher than what is stated. And I also state in my last press conference that this environment is contributing to crime, increasing crime in the country, you know, and it needs to be addressed. And I think the government is irresponsible in not urgently addressing poverty within the country also. Okay? I think they're a bit reckless in the way they're and discriminatory in the way they are doling out money from the public coffers.
The Chamber of Commerce has reported that most of the store owners in Georgetown are saying that they do not see a bright Christmas because people are not buying. Public servant wages are too low. They're not buying. They're just buying food stuff. Now, if this trend continues, is Ghana heading for a bleak Christmas?
Definitely. But I'm saying to you, if we have our way, this trend would not continue. Okay? I mean, we have been restraining our members. We have been going to the public, we have press conferences, and we laying out our positions very clear. The government have got to change its approach in the way they do things. They must be more even-handed and more general. They're discriminatory in the way they are dealing with the public funds as if it's children property. And it must change, and it will change.
Ms. Gardner, if you were to advise the government about to overcome these problems or these issues, what advice would you give to the government?
Listen to the voices of the public service. Listen to the voices of the workers. Even if you have to listen to those voices day and night, in and out, listen to those voices. You can only listen to those voices through their representative. So I will advise them, listen, sit and negotiate with the trade unions. Negotiate, and the government being one of the biggest employer. Sit and negotiate. The law, the Trade Union Recognition Act, clearly states that the government or the employer must negotiate in good faith. And you know what is interesting? We have other trade unions, we have other employers, and where we have the Ministry of Labor, which is the arm of the government, would sanction an employer who fails to negotiate in good faith. And the government, who is one of the largest employers, is doing the same thing, and they're not being penalized. So I will encourage them, or I'll advise the government, it is important for you to negotiate with your union, with the union that represents your workers.
What percentage of increase the union is asking for? The GSPU, the GPSU?
GPSU.
Yeah.
Well, all we did was support the government's call during the campaign. They had 50% increase. So we're going to start our negotiation, and we have proposed that in 2020 to commence our negotiations with a 50% increase, and that is negotiable. Right? It was their call during the campaign, so we will support that as a 50%. Now with the cost of living, the increased cost of living, I don't think that 50% should be negotiable. It should not be negotiable, and we should even move it higher than a 50% increase.
But I don't know which part of the world a government gives 50% increases public servants.
That was on the campaign trail.
Yeah, but even
we
to
only
that extent,
supported it.
Even to that, it's campaign, it's to get votes, but that's not practical.
Good. While it is not practical, while it is not.
It is practical, it is feasible, and it is sustainable.
Yeah. Mr. Yarde, Ms. Garner, I think, you know, the government has recognized that public servants are leaving, and if they want to keep the public service working, the nurses, you said, the professional staff, if they're leaving and we're losing our skill set, then we really can't get anything done professionally. So I hope that the government and the union will sit down and work out these issues. In closing, Mr. Yarde and Ms. Gardner, what are some of the plans for the 100th anniversary of the union, and what's the way forward?
Well, we have a number of activities planned in celebration of our 100th anniversary. And these activities where we're going to have, yes, we're going to have the government involved in our activities too. We're going to have our members involved. We're going to have civil society or corporate sponsors involved in our activities. One of the biggest things we want to have is training programs where we're going to have all these programs. We're going to have government as well as workers involved. So you're going to have a more collective approach in terms of moving forward. It's 100 years. 100 is important. And we would want the government to come on board and to start changing its attitude. Work towards more a positive approach towards your workers.
Thank you. And
so
before
there's
Mr.
a number
Yarde,
of activities planned.
before Mr. Yarde comes on the 100th anniversary, we'll have the first female president. So let me offer your congratulations to you in advance.
Thank you.
Mr. Yarde, anything in closing?
Yes, I would like to thank you folks for inviting us, and I would like to express my regrets for the difficulties that you're experiencing with me. But as I pointed out to you just now, an area in the Constitution. But I was involved in a lot of research for our court cases. You know, I also would like to thank you for your recommendations about what should be the minimum wage.
It's deserving of our public servants. Your mute is on, Mr. Yarde.
Maybe it was done accidentally, something, I don't know.
Yeah, all right. Ms. Gardner, thank you so much for being on with us tonight. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes. It is said that democracy cannot flourish without different views and opinions. Development will be retarded or stalled without different opinions. And different views and opinions by persons do not mean that he or she is against the opposition, the politicians, or governments. Constructive criticism should be welcomed by all. And it is time we end discrimination and vindictiveness in government and in opposition and against anyone and everyone, regardless of race or party affiliation. We need to put country first over personal interest. These are some of the tenets of democracy that every politician should accept and abide by if they truly believe in the concept of democracy and the development of the country. God bless Guyana.
Thank you. Mr. Yarde, you're back. Sorry, you got cut off. You want to just finish your closing statements? Well, thank you so much, Mr. Yarde, Ms. Gardner. I know tomorrow's election in Guyana, in the US. So we want to encourage all of our viewers, if you're living in the United States, please go to the polls and vote for local government election tomorrow. Again, God bless you all. God bless our great country. Now we'll hand over to the other presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Tell me when I come on the TV. Oh, I'm on. All right. Thank you very much to Charles Sugrim, Asquith Rose, and Mr. Nohar Singh, owner of Globespan, and Devin, our wonderful producer. Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Globespan. My name is Rusat Ramkapal. As the American-born son of Guyanese immigrants, I've always loved discussing both American and Guyanese politics. Tonight, the two have intersected with each other once again. Before we introduce our special guest, Michael Henry, the Republican candidate for Attorney General in New York State, let's look at how we got to this moment. Tomorrow, millions of Americans will vote in the midterm election for positions in the U.S. Congress, as well as state-level positions such as governor and state attorney general. It was widely expected to be a strong Republican year. However, few expected New York would be in play. New York is one of the most solidly Democratic states in this country. No Republican has won statewide since George Pataki's re-election 20 years ago. 4 years ago, the current Attorney General, Letitia James, won her race by nearly 30 points, 62 to 35. The latest polling in her race currently against Michael Henry has as a toss-up within the margin of error. Why is that? The answer is very simple. Crime. New Yorkers are fed up with it. Violent crime year over year in New York is currently up 30%. Transit crime is up 40%. Today, there have been 4 subway stabbings in the past 24 hours. One right in the heart of Richmond Hill, Queens, where many Guyanese New Yorkers live. A man was stabbed in the chest at the 111th Street train station. Think about how close to home that is for you. Could that have been your son, or your brother, or your neighbor? That's what a lot of New Yorkers are thinking right now. When asked about crime recently, Letitia James says she needs to see more data. Well, we all know that waiting for more data means waiting for more victims. So enough New Yorkers, including many Democrats and independents, are willing to make the change this year and potentially vote Republican, some for the first time ever. Kathy Hochul, the current Democrat governor, is so nervous that she's brought in both Bill Clinton and Joe Biden to campaign for her. The seemingly desperate Letitia James recently decided to campaign in Brooklyn at an event hosted by Rickford Burke. With this event, Burke continued his normal shenanigans that have come to be expected of him. However, we hold our elected officials and standard bearers to a higher account, and sadly, Letitia James backed him up every step of the way. Calling him a brother from another mother, James supported his frankly reckless and ridiculous allegations about the current Guyanese political situation in government, accusing the government of treating Afro-Guyanese as second and third-class citizens, and of Guyana not having fair elections or proper democratic institutions. This is against the position of the U.S. State Department, which accepted the free and fair election result in 2020, which resulted in the current PP government. James further promised to protect Rickford Burke in particular against Guyanese officials. Burke is currently a wanted man in Guyana, with the Guyanese police force having issued a wanted bulletin for him in September of this year. So to be clear, this is the top law enforcement official in New York State calling for the protection of a wanted man in Guyana. Interesting election strategy. James further promised that she would bring Burke's claims to the Biden administration, Department of Justice, and Democrat attorney generals across the country. Rickford Burke's event had a clear intention of trying to incense racial division among Guyanese and Guyanese Americans. Letitia James clearly intended to endorse Burke's nonsense. Why do I call it nonsense? As viewers of this program know, the current government of Guyana is not installed no matter what Rickford Burke or Letitia James says, or no matter what you think of the PP or PNC. If we look back at the elections of 2020 in Guyana, sorry, I heard some noise there just now. If we look back at the elections of 2020 in Guyana, the vote took place in March, but the transition from the APNU government to the PP did not occur until August. Someone's mic going off there. Yeah, but the transition did not occur until August. Despite James and Burke's claim of racism, we all know that the Afro-Caribbean leaders opposed the attempt of the APNU government to stay in power, including famously Mia Mottley. Former Prime Minister of Jamaica Bruce Golding said that he had never seen a more transparent attempt to alter the result of an election. Observers from CARICOM, the OAS, British Commonwealth, and Carter Center all noted that the election was free and fair. Only after pressure from the US, Canada, and the UK did the APNU government step aside. It was actually the Trump administration Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, took a leading role in the effort to ask President Granger to step aside, and having imposed visa sanctions on certain individuals with the threat of potentially more if the crisis continued. Pompeo would later say that we know the Guyanese people cherish democracy, they cherish freedom, they value free, fair, and transparent elections, just as Americans do, just as all people do. Guyanese Americans, especially since many of them left Guyana in the aftermath of rigged elections and the Burner government in the 70s and 80s, have a great appreciation for the importance of democracy, free and fair elections, and racial harmony. That's why so many of them took offense at James's support of someone like Burke, who supports denying the results of the Guyanese election of 2020 and encourages racial violence. Someone else took offense at James's statement, that was Michael Henry, a Republican opponent in the race for Attorney General. Henry issued a long statement condemning James and Burke's statements, and this past Saturday did something pretty rare and historic. As a leading Republican candidate, he outreached the Guyanese community, campaigning in Little Guyana, Queens. I covered that rally and saw firsthand how many Guyanese Americans, who typically vote Democrat, turned out to see him and voiced their support. So far, the video has over 15,000 views online. Tonight, he continues his outreach to the Guyanese community ahead of tomorrow's election and has been generous enough to come on this program tonight. Before we introduce him, though, we will play some of James's remarks at Burke's event. James has said, "Let them hear her back in Guyana," and boy, have many Guyanese and Guyanese Americans heard her. Let's remember that Guyanese Americans are currently the second largest immigrant group in Queens and fifth largest in New York City. At this rare moment in time, where we have such an unusually close race in New York, where Guyanese have become a topic of discussion in the race, and we have power as a voting bloc, we can all make the difference if and when we vote tomorrow. And whether we're in New York or Guyana, we believe in one people, one nation, and one destiny. I believe that we will be playing some of James's remarks, and then we will be introducing the candidate for Attorney General, Michael Henry, who's been generous enough to come on tonight. Oh, okay. Yeah. So due to limited time, we will skip the video of Letitia James, and we will go straight to the Republican candidate for Attorney General of New York, Michael Henry. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. How are you doing the night before the election? Introduce yourself to our audience and tell us how the campaign momentum is going so far.
Sure. First off, thank you for having me. I'm doing very well, cautiously optimistic. I was actually just in Queens, in Little Guyana, not too long ago. So to your audience that might not be familiar, I am a Queens resident myself. I am an attorney in private practice who, prior to being in private practice, I was in the mortgage industry, was in management. Eventually went back to law school at night, opened my own law firm. I've also done religious asylum work for people that are being persecuted, mainly in Asia, and help them gain status here in the United States. And for me, private citizen that's just been very frustrated with the crime crisis, the corruption crisis, the cost of living crisis. And what I've seen in this office in particular was that it's utilized for one of two reasons. The first one is to become the next governor. The second one is to weaponize against opponents. So I've decided to run to be able to professionalize an office and make it work for the taxpayers of New York, regardless of whether they're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. I want this office to be responsive to the needs of the people and coordinated. And as far as this issue recently, I felt the need to stand up because this was not only inaccurate information that was provided by the Attorney General of the state of New York. She was bullying and threatened to bully a foreign government on an issue that she clearly was not familiar with. And on top of that, she was causing what I felt was racial division. And she was trying to paint Indo-Guyanese as acting as racist. And I felt that what she did was irresponsible, which is a pattern with her. And I wanted to reach out to this community because this is a tough election. And the Indo-Guyanese community specifically has the ability to make their voices heard and let people know that this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Henry. Now, so you've condemned James's statement. You campaigned in Little Guyana over the weekend. You're coming on our tour tonight. You were in Little Guyana again today. What is your message to the Guyanese audience, in particular, Guyanese American audience, and how do you think your outreach has been received so far?
Sure. Look, everyone knows Rickford Burke is wanted in Guyana. He's been accused of terrorism. He's been accused of racism and much more. And for her to call him a brother from another mother and threaten to use her power against the Guyanese government, well, I'm going to tell you something. Threats of political violence are intolerable, and especially when you're bringing them to the shores of New York. He has threatened to shut down businesses. He has threatened to attack people's homes here in New York. And I promise this community, when I'm the Attorney General of this state, I am going to ensure that the Indo-Guyanese community specifically is not going to have to live in fear of threats from somebody who clearly does not understand how the rule of law works.
So on that specific issue, so Democrats in recent times in the U.S. have campaigned on standing against racism, standing against political violence in terms of January 6th and President Trump and refusal to accept election results. However, in this election right now, Letitia James, the current Democrat incumbent, has been associated with, as she called him, a brother from another mother, a man who notably supports racial violence, supports political violence, and supports rejecting the results of free and fair election. What do you think that says about the blatant hypocrisy of her position?
Right, she's advancing election denialism. The truth of the matter is this: the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, the European Union, multiple Afro-Caribbean nations stood by the results of this election. And after the 5-month attempted coup, everybody, for the most part, accepted the results and said this was a free and fair election. So for her to push this election denialism and talk about a subject that she, one, either didn't know what she was talking about, or secondly, talked about and misled everybody on what the facts were, was completely irresponsible. And what she also did is she tried to brandish the government and the Guyanese government as racist. She was trying to paint a picture of this horrible racism that's being inflicted on Afro-Guyanese. And what she did was she created a racial divide. We should not be creating racial divides. We should be working to unite communities and make people united. I live in Queens. There's a huge Indo-Guyanese community in Queens. We all live side by side when we come to this country. no matter what our background is. And that's the beauty of America. And for her to engage in this kind of divisive politics, number one, is disgusting. And then secondly, she once again proves she's pro-criminal, because anybody who could be proud to be associated with an individual like Rickford Burke should be ashamed of themselves and is not worthy of political office, let alone to be the state's chief law enforcement officer.
Yeah, so on the issue of standing against racism, so for various reasons, be it the immigration issue or how they perceive rhetoric on immigration or race, Guyanese and other immigrant groups as well, despite being largely socially conservative, they have tended to vote for the Democrats over the Republicans, even though I'll just speak on behalf of the Guyanese community. They love their faith, they love their family, they love freedom, they love America and the American dream, especially having come here in the face of leaving the lack of freedom, opportunity, and in their own country and coming here at that point in time. Now, what is your message to certain voters who, their hand may quiver as they switch from voting from Democrat to Republican for but maybe the first time for many of them, and what would you say to alleviate their concerns on certain issues, be it immigration and whatnot?
Right. First off, I'm looking to represent all New Yorkers, regardless of party affiliation, racial, gender, ethnic backgrounds, religious affiliation. I come from a family where my father had relatives who came here from Italy and changed their name to sound more American because of discrimination. So I understand that. I've done asylum work for people from China who've been persecuted for being Christian and Catholic. I've done asylum cases for people from countries like Liberia who've been persecuted for political reasons. I've done cases for women who've been victims of female genital mutilation in West Africa. So for me, I am welcoming of different communities, and I want to represent these communities. And nobody should be nervous of the fact that I'm a Republican. They should be embracing the fact that you're going to have a Republican that's going to fight to keep your community safe, that's going to stand by you as people are threatening political violence against you. And I'm going to work to make sure there's a cost of living so that small businesses could flourish and people could live in this city and live a good life, or live in this state and not have to worry about their relatives looking to move out of the state because they can't afford to live here.
Yeah, and just to be clear to our audience, this is not about one's views on maybe former President Trump or the Republicans or Democrats in general. This is about a particular election in New York on the ballot tomorrow, and the particular candidates, Letitia James and Michael Henry. Now, to move on to what is, I think, the biggest issue affecting this race right now, crime. I mean, Guyanese Americans, all New Yorkers, are seeing this rapid rise in crime and seeing how Letitia James is responding or failing to respond to this issue. After your rally on Saturday, I went down across Little Guyana, and I heard from small business owner after small business owner their fear of theft and robbery and nobody being held accountable. And we saw in the Little Guyana community, even the Little Guyana street sign was stolen. So this is a crime like we haven't seen in a very long time. What would you say to voters concerned about crime right now?
Sure, you're going to have an attorney general that's going to fight for victims' rights and not criminals' rights, and we need to have people held accountable. The first thing I would do as the attorney general is I would reach out to all 62 district attorneys in this state and see if they have the resources they need to be able to fight crime. I would restructure some of the agencies at the office. I'm also going to push program bills into the legislature that make positive changes to the criminal justice system. The other thing I would say is I'm going to use the bully pulpit to push for the full repeal of cashless bail. This law is not what it was presented as to the public. This was presented for nonviolent first-time offenders. There are very violent crimes that are eligible under this law. This law does not make criminals accountable. I would push for the full repeal and encourage the legislature to put something in place for nonviolent offenders that we want to keep out of the system. And then I would also push for the full repeal of less is more, which is the parole bill, where parolees are being allowed to commit crimes while they're on parole, which that's the time they're still completing their sentence, and then they're not being remanded back to prison. They're being allowed to just keep staying on the streets. And then lastly, we need to we need to amend raise the age, because this has led to a rash of teenage shootings, and gangs are starting to use teenagers to commit violent crimes because they know they're going to go to family court instead of state court. So crime is an issue I'm going to address seriously. So the law-abiding citizens of this city and of this state should not be living in fear. It should be the criminals who are thinking about doing something wrong. They should be living in fear that they're going to be held accountable for their actions, and currently they are not. And there's not a bigger contrast between me and Letitia James. In 2018, she campaigned on cashless bail. She got what she wanted, and it failed. She recently said she needs more data or she'd revisit any changes to cashless bail. And that is a despicable mindset, because more data means more victims. And you know, we saw it when I'm walking through Little Guyana the other day. Store owners telling me they've been robbed. Someone telling me his 2 friends got mugged walking out of a bar. I hear these stories in every single community I go to. And as the Attorney General, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior. And I'm going to work hard to get this crime crisis under control, because it is intolerable and it needs to stop.
And moving on to another issue that has affected a lot of New Yorkers and a lot of Guyanese who have the mindset of becoming entrepreneurs one day, small-time landlords have been frankly rolled over by the Democrat policies of Andrew Cuomo, continued under Kathy Hochul. What would you do to help mitigate the disastrous policies of the past few years that, for those who don't know, have led to countless tenants just not paying rent for months on end and in some cases years on end?
There's limits to what I would do, but there is a big contrast between me and Letitia James. She actually supports good cause eviction. That is a horrible bill, because what we have right now is a tenant court system. It's not landlord-tenant, it's tenant court. And we have a system where there's people who own 2-family homes. They need that second unit to pay for their rent and their mortgage, or their mortgages and their taxes. And what happens is, when these individuals, and in many instances, these people could afford to pay the rent, they're just gaming the system. What happens is, the individual who's not being paid rent has to wait years. Sometimes it could be a year and a half before you finally get some kind of adjudication in court, or even get a hearing in court by the time it gets to a judge. Meanwhile, for a year and a half, you have been paying your taxes and your mortgage, because that doesn't stop, and you're in financial duress. So I would publicly advocate against that bill. I would publicly advocate for better policies, and even push policies through the state legislature, because what is going on right now is basically criminal in the system, where how tenants are taking advantage of landlords, and it's wrong. And I don't understand why Letitia James or any of these other people associated with this would support that type of bill, because it makes it nearly impossible to evict a bad tenant. And what you're doing is, once again, rewarding bad behavior, and you are financially crippling hardworking people who don't deserve it.
So we've taken up about 15 minutes of your time. I know it's the night before the election, so I'll just ask you one more question before a closing remark from you. So you've reached out to the Guyanese community. I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say that we really appreciate it. How do we make sure that this is something that goes beyond election day? This isn't just a rarity that we've seen a Republican candidate, leading Republican like you, come out to us. I mean, in recent years, we saw the Trump administration did reach out under Mike Pompeo after the 2020 election. Pompeo did a historic visit to Guyana. I know a lot of Guyanese don't vote Republican right now, but they love Ronald Reagan from 1986 and the Reagan amnesty that benefited a lot of them. How do you make sure that you're not the last Republican they see, and how do you make sure you in particular are continuing this relationship beyond election day, that Attorney General Michael Henry is seen in the Guyanese community, and maybe even one day in Guyana? Who knows?
Listen, I would love to go to Guyana. I hear that the development that's going on there is phenomenal, and there's a lot of growth in the country. So I would love to take a trip there. What I could say is, look, I'm not going to give you the typical political answer. What I'm going to ask the community is to put their trust in me and give me a vote. And I promise you that in 4 years, you'll be voting for me again, because I will do the right thing by the community. And I'm someone that believes, I can only speak for myself, but I am someone that believes we need a much more diverse Republican Party. We need a Republican Party that looks like the state of New York, not just upstate New York. And how do we do that? We get into communities like the Guyanese community, and we start recruiting people into the party and making them feel welcome and making them feel like we have a future, because then we can start recruiting candidates at the local level, and everyone has more representation. So what I would say is, I would ask humbly for your trust. You give me this, you vote for me tomorrow, and I guarantee you in 4 years you're going to be proud to vote for me again. And I will be around, because for one, I live in Queens, so I'm not too far from the communities. Most of the communities down here, whether it's the Bronx or Queens or Long Island, and like I said, I look forward to building this relationship further and eventually taking a trip to Guyana.
Well, election tomorrow, it seems like there's a red wave nationwide, and the crime concern, New York is closer than it's been in 20 years. The Guyanese community, second largest immigrant group in Queens, fifth largest in New York City. They have the potential to be a game changer if they get on and vote tomorrow.
One thing I want to say in closing, not just with crime, I will not tolerate threats of political violence against this community. If you're going to make threats of political violence against this community, you're going to be held accountable. It's not going to be tolerated.
Yes, we fully agree with you there. I can say for one that I think your outreach to the community has been quite remarkable. We wish you all the best tomorrow on the campaign trail, and as election night the results come in. Do you have any final closing remarks that you want to say?
No, I just would like to thank the community for embracing me and seeing that I'm in this fight with them. And I really appreciate the openness and the welcoming the welcome that I've received in the community. And I look forward to building this relationship moving forward.
All right, thank you so much, Michael Henry, Republican candidate for New York Attorney General.
Thank you very much for having me.